Right, people, so I've seen a bunch of iPad leaks surfacing on the interwebs, and so today I thought I'd make a video accumulating all those leaks along with my personal predictions as to what changes Apple will be bringing to the 2021 iPad lineup. So let's begin with the iPad Pro lineup. So we usually see Apple refresh the iPad Pros every 18 months, but apparently Apple's going to be launching one as soon as March 2021. And you may be wondering, if Apple's going to be releasing a new iPad Pro this soon, what groundbreaking feature is it going to debut? Well, it's 5G, people. Yes, 5G just got real on the iPad Pro. I'm kidding, by the way, if you couldn't recognize the sarcasm. I don't care about 5G. Why are we having 5G on an iPad? Who knows? And in fact, we're having millimeter wave 5G on the iPad for some reason. So yeah, you can have the fastest 5G available on an iPad. I'm just confused. Thankfully, that is not the big feature with this iPad Pro. In fact, it's about the display and specifically Mini LED. Now, you've probably heard me mention Mini LED before, but essentially it's the best of OLED and LCD harmoniously combining together to create this perfect display. So you get the deep blacks, the rich detail with OLED displays, and of course the reliability you get with LCD displays. So basically no burn-in. And that altogether should create the best ever display on an iPad. It should be mind-blowing. Right? Well, I'm not too sure because I'll be honest, I think the current LCD panel on the iPad Pros are really good. And honestly, I've never wondered to myself that, hey, this iPad would be better if it had Mini LED because the blacks aren't deep enough. So yeah, I'm not too sure if Mini LED will be that big of a deal, but it is going to be something that Apple can use in the marketing. They'll probably have a fancy name for it, such as Super Retina XDR Pro Max 5G display, and yeah, that'll probably get a few people to upgrade because marketing. As for other upgrades, we should expect the usual spec bumps, so we're going to be seeing an A14X chip in this, and essentially the A14X is going to be based on the M1 chip, so basically the power of the M1 MacBook Air chucked in an iPad. That's how insane this new iPad Pro is going to be in terms of performance, and some might even say it's a tad overpowered. But of course, maybe Apple would take advantage of the A14X chip and finally give us Pro apps on the iPad, because that's probably the biggest thing missing currently on the iPads. They are very capable machines, but Apple hasn't given them the software they need to take advantage of the great hardware. And so hopefully this year, Apple gives us the Pro apps we need. If Apple gives us Pro apps on the iPad, I will gladly jump ship to the iPad Pro because that is pretty much my perfect computer, but I need Final Cut for editing. And so basically Apple give us Final Cut on the iPad and I will be a very happy customer. Of course, this will mean Apple needs to upgrade the RAM in the iPad Pro because right now they have 6 gigs of RAM and apparently that's not enough for Apple's Pro apps on the iPad. So hopefully they bring it up to 8 gigs like it is on the M1 machines. Right now I come to the wildcard leaks, the leaks that I'm not really sure about but are from pretty credible sources, so I thought I'd briefly mention them. So the first odd leak is Apple will be killing off the 11-inch iPad Pro. Now, this does kind of make some sense because obviously the iPad Air now fills that space in terms of an 11-inch iPad, and with the iPad Pro being £200 more for very minor upgrades, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for Apple to keep in the lineup, so maybe Apple just makes the big size the default size on the iPad Pro. But I do think consumers are used to having 2 sizes on the iPad Pro, and also the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is a behemoth of an iPad, and in terms of portability, it is a bit of a struggle compared to the 11-inch iPad Pro. So for consumers who want the Pro end features at a smaller size, I think there does need to be a smaller iPad, and so maybe Apple will make the 11-inch iPad slightly bigger at 12 inches, so it's slightly bigger than the iPad Air, and of course that in a way could upsell some people to going Pro. Anyways, the second wildcard leak I've heard is that Apple is going to be adopting OLED displays on a second iPad Pro refresh in 2021. So they're going to refresh the iPad Pro twice, once with Mini LED and then OLED in the same year. Now this is a very, very, very dodgy leak, and I would usually dismiss leaks like this, but this has come from a sort of reliable leaker, the Elec, who is a publication from Korea, I think. So yeah, that's why I'm kinda considering it, but at the same time, it just seems unlikely. Why would Apple release 2 iPads in the same year? Actually, this has happened before, because if you remember back in 2012, Apple released the iPad 3 and the iPad 4 within the same year. So maybe this could actually happen. Anyways, let's move on. So the next iPad is the iPad Air, and I can pretty much gloss over this. There is pretty much little to nothing in terms of leaks regarding a future iPad Air, and that's pretty obvious because we just got a new iPad Air, and judging by Apple's very weird iPad Air release schedule, we shouldn't be seeing one anytime soon. So now we come to the most popular iPad, the iPad. That's what Apple calls it, the iPad. And you probably know it as the peasant or budget iPad. So this is obviously very, very popular among students, and apparently Apple is planning to refresh the budget iPad in a major way. So for the longest time, the budget iPad has pretty much retained the same basic design we saw back with the original iPad Air, so it's time for a refresh, and apparently we could see something next year. Now this information comes from a not so reliable leaker, and so take all of this with a humongous grain of salt, but he says the next budget iPad should be very similar to the iPad Air 4 we currently have. So basically, we could be finally seeing thinner bezels, Touch ID on the side, and overall a more iPad Pro-like aesthetic, and just modernizing the budget iPad, which is very much what it needs right now because that iPad design is archaic. Anyways, coming back to this pretty fishy report, I don't think this will happen, and it's because if Apple were to develop a new design for the base iPad, that's going to increase the cost and that's going to increase the price, and the best part about the budget iPad is how cheap it is, and so if it goes up by $50 or $100, that's going to put off a lot of consumers. So what I think Apple will do is maybe use the iPad Air 3's design, which obviously was based on the 2017 iPad Pro. That of course was a 10.5-inch body with a laminated display, which I think is something we really need to see on the budget iPad, and I think that design overall is great for the base iPad. Obviously it will have slightly thinner bezels than the current design, but it still will retain the thick forehead and chin, so there is a substantial upgrade when you go for the Air or the Pro. As for internal upgrades, I don't think Apple will change a lot, because if you remember with the iPad 7, they retained the same A10 chip that was in the iPad 6, and so what I think Apple will do with the iPad 9 is retain the same A12 chip in the current iPad 8, because it is plenty fast for a budget iPad and still should be fine for years to come. And finally, we leave the best till last, the iPad mini 6. So it's fair to say Apple's neglected the iPad mini, because the basic iPad mini design has been used since its conception back in 2012, and yes, I'm aware it's got slightly thinner and it's probably had slightly thinner bezels as well across the years, but overall, the iPad mini in terms of design has stayed the same for 8 years. And so more than anything in Apple's lineup, this is due for a redesign. So this iPad mini 6 next year, according to rumors, is going to be the iPad Air 4 we have right now, except it's going to be smaller. That's the leak. So yeah, basically the same chip, same colors, same amount of RAM, same pretty much everything, except it's in a smaller package. So basically it's like the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12 mini. Now, I'll be honest, there has been a lot of hype for this iPad mini 6, this huge redesign for the iPad mini, but I'm just not on board. You see, what's the point in having an iPad mini in 2021 when we have phones as large as this? Like, I just don't see a whole point in having a small iPad if I have a phone that's nearly as large as an iPad mini. But of course, Everybody has various use cases. For example, some people still read. Believe it or not, I haven't touched a book personally in like 5 years, so obviously that wouldn't appeal to me, but there are people who read, and the iPad mini will be a great experience as an e-reader. Similarly, I've heard many medical students rave about the iPad mini and how it fits so easily in their pockets, and so there are niche use cases for the iPad mini, I guess, but it just won't have the wide appeal the other iPads have. But either way, I am excited to see Apple give the iPad mini some much needed love and attention. And on that note, I'm going to end it here. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, click that bell notification, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.